Kirk Matthews from Newsroom 6. A great deal of excitement in the Pacific Northwest at this hour. About 20 minutes ago, the Forest Service reported that Mount St. Helens had begun erupting.
With that bulletin, Newsroom 6 began covering the biggest story of 1980. Mount St. Helens was reawakening, the first volcano to erupt in the continental United States since microwave and electronic technology revolutionized television news gathering.
We have an eruption at this point, and it's rising. We're getting continuous eruptions at this point of ash material being thrown into the air. Look at that go. There it comes again. What a beautiful sight.
During the months which followed, the crews of KOIN-TV would make broadcast history. Their coverage of the events leading up to the May 18th eruption was made possible by the latest television hardware and a Jet Ranger helicopter equipped for live broadcasts.
We're seeing a large cavity 200 to 300 feet across. We do have a live volcano. Whether it will get bigger or stop at this point, we do not know.
Newsroom 6 was ready for May 18th. The following scenes are a condensation of the extensive live coverage of the major breaking story of the year.
Good morning again. It's almost 12 noon here on Channel 6, and we have some more information on the situation up at Mount St. Helens at this hour. Serious problems, flooding. A wall of water, we are told, is coming down the Toutle River. Interstate 5 is closed north of Portland because there are fears from authorities that that wall of water is going to blanket the entire area. We do have crews in the air and on the ground checking that situation out for you, and we will be switching to them live throughout the afternoon.
Following the plume from the satellite pictures taken from 23,000 miles in space, earlier, about 9:15 this morning, in this infrared picture. We should point out we're not looking at black and white photography here, but we're the shades of gray, that is the darkness being the warmer areas and the light being the cold spots. And at 9:15 this morning, we could see the plume from the mountain extending well to the east, almost to the Tri-Cities area, then back most of it north of the Oregon border, but almost straight east and beginning to spread out somewhat north and south. But the main thing about the Tri-Cities at 9:15 was the eastern extreme. Now, the latest satellite picture, just about 45 minutes ago at 11:15, we can see that that plume now has spread out almost to the eastern border of Oregon, almost clear on into the Oregon border in the extreme southeastern corner of the state of Washington, and beginning to expand out more to the north as the winds now beginning to come from the west-southwest rather than from the due west as they have been over the past few hours. And that situation, once it gets around to the southwest, should be more steady for the rest of the afternoon.
Ken, we are at a private campground called the Lake Merwin Campers Hideaway. It's near Amboy, Washington. We have a spectacular shot of the mountain, as you've seen. Huge plume of ash and steam spewing skyward.
And the top of the mountain looked like somebody took a razor blade and shaved the whole top off.
So the top of the mountain really appears to have changed shape.
And shortened. It has gotten a lot shorter.
That is, the top of the mountain seems to have been shaved off?
Shaved off of the top.
Now,
Wider.
Could that be just your impression because of the plume has widened out, or does it really appear as though the top of the mountain is gone from your recollections from earlier?
I think the top of the mountain is gone. You could even see big hunks go up and then start falling back down.
Bill Diaz is somewhere up in Toutle right now, and he's on the telephone with us. Bill, could you give us a brief synopsis of what's going on up there and what the immediate danger is?
Okay, Ken, can you hear me, first of all?
Yes, I can. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm talking from the Bud Tippery residence. We're about a mile and a half toward the mountain from the Toutle post office. The roads, of course, are completely sealed off in the area. It's been a lot of devastation from the flooding. Now, what happened was the glacier activity you described hit the South Fork of the Toutle River. The Toutle River is usually a very peaceful, placid stream flowing down from the mountain. Today, it was transformed into a roaring, raging torrent with a wall of water described between 15 and 20 feet high, at this point 30 feet high, and others with a wall of logs at the front of the wall of water, pushing in, knocking out just about every bridge between St. Helens and the town of Toutle. We were on a bridge about an hour ago at Toutle that was still being battered by logs coming down from the mountain. The Sheriff's Department evacuated the bridge as we were on it, made us hit for higher ground. The higher ground point we ended up at, as I mentioned, the Bud Tippery residence. There is a problem with communications here because all the roads leading to Mount St. Helens that have to traverse the South Fork of the Toutle, anything the St. Helens side, the bridges are out, and some people are still unaccounted for. Just before we went on the air, Mr. Lowell McCain just came into this house. He was trying to get word to the Sheriff's Department about his wife, Elsie, and 9-year-old daughter, who were moss picking this morning, and they may be caught by they haven't heard from them since about 7:30 this morning. I asked him if Elsie would know what to do, and he said, yeah, she probably headed to higher ground. So they're trying to get there right now. I'm sorry.
Okay, Bill, how high was that wall of water? We've heard some varying reports anywhere from 30 to 50 feet high, and you really can't get any sort of sense of perception looking at these pictures that were shot from Helicopter 6.
Okay, the problem is there are areas of the South Fork of the Toutle that are very wide, so the water could go through not so deep. It would be about 15 feet high. However, where the canyons force the water to raise higher, and that's when it was washing out bridges. And we saw on one bridge at least the high water point had been at least 30 feet above the normal stream bed. So it has gone through, and it was at least 30 feet high in some points.
Washington State officials have now closed Interstate 90 out of Seattle. That means both major arterials out of the city are closed. Interstate 5 is also closed north of Portland, all the way north, because of fears those floodwaters may hit the interstate. So the situation is becoming quite serious at this time. Because of heavy smoke and ash in eastern Washington, traffic is being rerouted over Blewett Pass. But once again, I-90 eastbound, Interstate 5 southbound out of Seattle closed because of zero visibility all the way down here to the Portland, Oregon area. Dr. Leonard Palmer and reporter Alan Breeze just got back from a flight over the volcano from Helicopter 6. We have some video that you shot. What was it like? There are some conflicting reports of lava eruptions. Nobody seems to know what's going on. What can you add to that?
Unless someone has some better observations than we had, the clouds are so aggressively billowing over the mountain area and off toward the northeast that we're not able to see the kinds of material that is going on the ground itself.
From the helicopter, right?
I see. What did it look like? Was there heavy sulfur in the air when you flew over? I don't know how close you guys were able to get to.
We're restricted to an area 20 miles to the west, and the air, of course, out there is upwind. I would say that the effects of the volcano upwind are probably less than 2 miles from the volcanic crater itself. The entire top of the mountain, of course, is blowing consistently, probably since about 8:30 this morning when the first eruptions occurred. They appear to be coming very much from the cone of the volcano and blowing about 2 miles above the crest of the mountain, which means something like 20,000–25,000 feet before they disappear into the cloud cover. There is 1 or 2 miles column of material blasting vertically in black up into the sky, which can be seen from time to time. Then it billows out, cauliflower-like on the sides, billowy, and those billows are continuing all the way up into the cloud cover, 20,000–25,000 feet up. The cloud then proceeds northeastward, directly 45 degrees true bearing northeast, and is being carried off toward Wenatchee. The lightning that occurs from time to time appears to be extending vertically from about a mile and a half to 2 miles up, about 20,000 feet, about 10,000 feet up above the mountain crest, and is falling down onto the flanks of the volcano when we see it. And many people are concerned about the danger from the ash material. If you have lung problems, if you have some kind of a breathing problem, it would be particularly a concern. I would say that the glassy nature, the sharp, angular silica nature of the material could be a very serious problem if you inhale it. Definitely would advise at least a handkerchief, better yet, painting masks, anything that can protect a person from the inhaling of this dusty material.
We're getting to the point now on the tape where we're going to see the leading edge of mud, which I believe is just starting now. There's mud going out maybe 20, 30 feet in front of the jam, and then the log jam really comes on strong.
There it goes.
And it's definitely a dangerous situation because those logs are 2, 3 feet, 4 feet thick, so you can tell the power of the situation we're looking at.
I suspect that the log jam now is probably getting about to the Cowlitz River and flowing down toward Longview and Kelso. I'm not sure where it is because we've been on the ground for a few minutes, but when that gets through, there were a few boats moored along the banks of the river. I would say it's very dangerous. When these logs get fully thick, we saw at one point that there was a 3-foot layer of logs that was shearing against a bank, another 3-foot layer of logs shearing over the top of that 3-foot layer, and a 3rd layer coming up behind. No boat moored in that area would be safe.
I'm just wondering if we can sort of put this thing into perspective on what the volcano is doing. We've had a lot of steam and ash eruptions. I know volcanology is not an exact science, but what does all this mean? It has been erupting continuously. I know there are some conflicting reports of whether or not this is going to precede a lava eruption. What can we do to put this thing into perspective in light of all the eruptions over the last couple of months?
Eventually, we're going to get everything. We started out with some earthquakes and nothing happening on the surface. We've been about a month and a half, almost crowding toward 2 months, of steam eruptions blasting the old rock material around. And this morning, we have gotten the magmatic eruptions, which are a whole order of magnitude larger in terms of their enthusiasm and vigor. This is going to cause a lot of nuisance downwind. The lava eruptions will come. The pyroclastic flows could come inside of these, hot fiery avalanches coming down the side of the mountain. So people in low-lying areas anywhere near the flanks of the mountain should definitely have a really serious concern at this point, and particularly people who are downwind from the mountain.
Let me briefly recap the situation as it now stands in the area. Interstate 5 from Portland to Seattle totally closed down. There are fears of floodwaters covering the interstate. Most of the major roads are closed by authorities. We don't know where the rushing water is at this point. They are extremely concerned. We have had reports of people missing in the area. That has not been confirmed. The Cowlitz County Sheriff's Office says they know of no fatalities at this point. One person has already been killed, and that was up in Kittitas County. Apparently he was flying a plane, and according to the Associated Press wire service, he must have been blinded by ash, and he flew into some Bonneville Power Administration power lines. He was killed instantly. The man was in a crop duster. He was from Ellensburg, Washington. Dr. John, are you ready to go? What do we have right now?
Well, we have some late reports from the airport. The National Weather Service observers who have been watching this plume of smoke on their weather radar there earlier this morning reported the tops between 55 and 60,000 feet. The higher thin clouds, of course, with the smoke reducing the visibility around the area. Some of the reports downwind, and that's what we're concerned with now, is which way this is being carried by the upper winds. The upper winds still generally from the due west. We are getting some indication, however, of some slight swing in the winds from the more southwest. That is, some reports of smoke and ash further north than we have earlier. For example, Wenatchee weather observers reporting that they're seeing some smoke, specifically say heavy smoke layer east through southwest with fine ash falling south through southwest. And at the airport, after still getting a lot of smoke downwind in the Walla Walla Pasco area with thunderstorm type clouds there. The Portland indicates that the plume, we mentioned at 43,000 feet now. We do have a late satellite picture also, just from 12:15 this afternoon. And this, again, is not a black and white photograph, but an infrared picture where the darkness indicates heat rather than in the white, of course, colder temperatures. We can see from the start of the plume, not quite as white as it has been, but it's being carried downstream now, very heavy in the extreme eastern portions, southeastern portions of Washington, already to the Idaho border and down to just about the Oregon border. That should, of course, be carried into northern Idaho by this time. And we're getting pictures about once every half hour now. We'll be watching that plume as it moves on downstream. But the winds still very much from the west or just south of west, running about 20 miles per hour at the mountaintop, as high as 50 to 60 miles per hour as we get up about 8 to 10 miles. So we'll be carried rapidly downstream at the higher elevations and almost in a due easterly direction. Ken?
Okay. Apparently we've got something happening up on the mountain right now. You can see some plumes of explosion. We're not exactly sure what that means right now. Dr. Leonard Palmer is back in the newsroom. Dr. Palmer, if you can get a microphone on real quick. We're not exactly sure what's going on. What are we looking at?
Well, we're looking from the south, I believe. I think this is...
From Amboy.
Right. We're seeing some kind of a surge coming down the western flank.
Do we have any idea what that means? Or I can't see very well from the
That's curious. When we were there, the winds were going directly toward the northeast, and what we're seeing now is something rolling down the flank. There is a fault on this side of the mountain, a crack that goes directly down to the west, and it appears that we're getting some kind of eruption along that crack. We're still seeing the winds lifting up from that area and going toward the east. It appears that the mountain is developing, playing around with the vent areas, causing a considerable change in the eruptive position. We're seeing that I think I'm seeing that it is still, see that cloud billowing off to the upper right corner?
Right.
Still billowing primarily from the cone of the mountain. And why that's billowing off to the left is not possible to really verify, except I would guess it's erupting from that flank fracture, that fault that runs directly down the west flank of the mountain.
Len, why don't you guys get up in the helicopter and get up there and check in with us in a few minutes, okay?
Okay.
All right, thank you, Dr. Leonard Palmer. A brief recap, Mount St. Helens erupted at 8:39 a.m. this morning. It is the biggest eruption ever recorded of Mount St. Helens so far. There have been conflicting reports of whether or not there has been lava coming out of there. A lot of the information is obscured by the clouds. There is just no way they can get in close enough to take a look to confirm what is happening on top of the mountain. You're looking at a live picture from near Amboy, Washington, from our camera perched there looking to the north of Mount St. Helens. Interstate 5 again closed from Portland to Seattle. Interstate 90, the major east-west route out of Seattle, also totally closed. The situation becoming extremely serious. And that'll about wrap it up for now. We're going to be back shortly. We have no scheduled time. We will continually update the story throughout the afternoon. Further details on Newsroom 6 at 5 and a 30-minute special recapping the day's activities on Mount St. Helens tonight, again at 8 p.m. Stay with us this afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm Ken Wu, along with Kurt Matthews in the Channel 6 newsroom. Here's what's happening. Mount St. Helens has erupted. It is a major eruption. We do not know for sure if any lava has come out of the mountain at this point. We do know scores of people are missing, including Harry Truman from Spirit Lake. 5 people are known dead in the wake of the most violent volcanic eruption yet on the mountain. Alan Breeze is in the newsroom with us. Alan just returned from the Kelso area on board Helicopter 6. Alan, I don't even know where to begin on this thing. It's just so gigantic.
It is, and its details or any really good information is really hard to come by at a point like this, but there's definitely, at least as you said, 5 people killed, and perhaps more. There's no way of telling at this point. I just got back from the Amboy area, among other places, along with Kelso, and there are thousands of people looking at the mountain. Many of those thousands of people are within the 20-mile radius that we can't go in the air, and that radius is probably safe, but if you go much closer than about 15 miles, you're probably getting into pretty unsafe territory. When we were at Kelso, at the Kelso airport, we ran into about 12 helicopters from the Air National Guard, and we spoke with Major Dave Mullins of the National Guard. He went in about 10 miles close up the Toutle River Valley, and he said it was the worst devastation he's ever seen. He said it looked something like an atomic bomb going off, or as if an atomic bomb had gone off. We have that interview now.
We could see the mud coming down the North Fork of the river, and the mud probably is, in some areas, is a quarter of a mile wide. It's just taken everything in the valley with it. And then we started noticing that the forest on every side was totally laying on the ground, just miles and miles and miles of devastation. As I said, it looks like an atomic bomb just totally leveled the area.
Is there any idea how many people we may be talking about that have been affected up there at this point?
I have no idea at this point. As I say, our crew only saw probably, well, actually our crew didn't see any. It was the aircraft behind us saw probably 2 or 3 in one car.
That had been killed by the mud or
killed by the heat. The indications are that it's the heat and the blast that's getting them.
That blast that we're talking about is to the north and to the northwest of Mount St. Helens, maybe about 10 miles out. Dr. Leonard Palmer was up in the air just after we did this interview with us, and he described what this area might have looked like, or might look like now, from Helicopter 6.
What we're seeing on the mountain is that the top of the mountain is entirely shrouded in an eruptive cloud, but there is a cloud rising from the north flanks of the mountain that extends out about 10 miles.
above that 10-mile arm, it appears that there has been something like a pyroclastic flow, and lifting up from it is a continuous cloud running north. I think what we're seeing is something that would probably be a hot ash fall into Spirit Lake. I think it does not look good for people in that area now.
And it does not look good for anybody who is in very close to that mountain now. As we said, there are tongues of this hot ash, which is apparently hot enough to kill people and knock down trees, which are working their way down the mountain. So it's been a very good idea that people have been cleared from the area close to the mountain. It's too bad for those people who have been close that they were not gotten away. They didn't get away earlier, and any type of evacuation was obviously a very good idea.
Alan, about 3 o'clock, we were told by the U.S. Forest Service that a plane flying over the area, over the Spirit Lake area, says Spirit Lake is just totally gone. It's just devastated. There's nothing left of it except a crater of just ash and gas. Nobody's been able to get in close enough to see it because of the gigantic ash eruptions that continues to pour out of that volcano. That eruption began at about 8:40 this morning, and it has not stopped. The University of Washington and the Portland State University Seismological Departments say we've had continuous earthquakes throughout the day. Beginning at 3:20 p.m. this afternoon, we have had one giant earth tremor moving through the Portland area, and we have been flooded with calls here in the Channel 6 newsroom about that. The earth tremor is continuing. We don't know when all this is going to end. Kirk?
Ken, as if things weren't bad enough with the volcanic ash and smoke spewing forth from Mount St. Helens at this hour, several fires are going on. Forest fires in the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest caused apparently by lightning created from the static electricity that results when that giant plume goes into the air. And also, several rivers in southwest Washington have flooded their banks. Mudslides from the sides of Mount St. Helens have rushed into rivers and streams, sending logs, mud, and water cascading down the valleys, in some instances knocking out bridges and roads, leaving logging equipment stranded alongside the banks in a number of places. Bill Diaz is at an excellent vantage point right now, and he has a live update for us on the situation. Bill, what can you tell us?
That's right, Kirk. We're about 15 miles from the base of the mountain. We're west of it now, and fortunately we have a sea breeze coming in that's keeping some of that gassy material away from our vantage point. As you mentioned, we do have information on the flooding, but right now, before we get to that, I'm here with J.B. Parker, who is a Weyerhaeuser logger who was working at that 12-road camp, which was completely wiped out today, and you were in there just after that flood went through. What'd you see?
Oh, about half the trucks are gone. The truck shack is plumb across the road. The train is it's plumb out in Johnson Creek. And it's pretty much of a mess. We must have lost over half of our log trucks.
What about anybody in there when this happened?
Just the watchman, and he heard a big roar, and he took off to high ground, and he was all right.
Now, what we'd like to show you is some of the tape that we took earlier in the area of the Toutle River, if you'll just stand by here. We passed at least 5 roadblocks like this one between the Interstate 5 freeway and the town of Toutle, Washington. Shortly after we got through, authorities completely sealed off the area. Thanks to the evacuation plan, much of Toutle had been evacuated before the first flood swept the valley around 10:15 a.m. A wall of logs and water tore out bridges between Toutle and the volcano. That wall measured anywhere between 15 and 30 feet high, according to reports from people we talked to. Now, the water battered but did not demolish this bridge on the Spirit Lake Highway east of Toutle.
This isn't bad. There's nothing here now.
No, that was
That's
a
the
log
bridge.
thumping the bridge.
This is nothing. It was solid log, solid, wall to wall, all across here for about 20 minutes.
About a week and a half ago, we warned of possible flooding in a campground area east of Toutle. That area is completely flooded. The flooding is coming from the South Fork of the Toutle River, which comes right down from Mount St. Helens, and it feeds into the main Toutle about a mile from this point. Did you expect to be evacuated on such short notice? Was it a surprise?
I did.
When we see the mountain.
Yeah. What was it like to you when you saw the mountain go? What'd you see?
Well, I was just really new. We just all sat around and watched it. Yeah, we just took a break.
Have you ever seen an eruption that big before?
No, I never have.
Looked like an atomic bomb going off.
Yeah, it was. It was, what, 50,000 feet in the air is what they said?
Yeah. I was in bed this morning. I heard some rumbling. I got outside, stark naked and everything. I looked up there and I thought I was going to see 25 on the Richter scale. I was scared. I was nervous. All I could see was I live up there pretty close to the mountain. All I could see was the whole sky was just billowing and just puffing out with smoke, and it had me nervous. I ain't kidding you.
South fork of the Toutle River coming down the mountain right now.
Get up the bridge! Let's get on film this.
John, get over here!
We evacuated the bridge and headed for higher ground when we got a report that a massive mud flow was headed this way on the south fork of the Toutle River.
It's just taken out a lot of our land and our trees right down there below the bridge right now. And we're worried about our two houses. You know, we have two rentals down there, and we're worried about those.
That they may get flooded out?
Yeah, if this big mudslide comes, it's right up to them now.
It is.
Right
so
down.
Any more will just kind of shift the balance.
Oh, yes.
What do you think of this whole thing?
Oh,
did this catch you by surprise?
It sure did. It's something I don't think we'll ever see again.
The thing about those mud flows, there were several of them today, and after the south fork of the Toutle River flooded, later on in the afternoon when we were on our way up here to our vantage point, the north fork of the Toutle began flooding. Part of the problem was that area got dammed up with logs, and as the water would build behind the dammed areas and build pressure, then it would crash through the logs, and all of that debris would go sweeping down, and that's why you're getting all of these reports of floods and bridges being washed out by that major log flows down from the mountain. Now behind me here, I don't know how well you can see it, but we've got that plume, that gassy ash plume coming out of the mountain. It's been erupting all day. We've seen it several times. We've taken pictures from here and other locations trying to get the pictures as they occurred.
Thank you, Bill. Bill Diaz, of course, reporting from an excellent vantage point on the western side of Mount St. Helens, still erupting, still sending forth, as you can see, that smoke and ash into the air. Ken?
We will have more on Mount St. Helens, plus we'll check in with Chuck Wise on the situation with the ash spreading throughout the area when Newsroom 6 continues.
Chuck mentioned a moment ago some incredible news from eastern Washington. It is as dark as night over there, northeast of the erupting Mount St. Helens. Reports from the scene indicate it's still pitch dark outside, and residents are warned to stay inside. Kimberly Kohler reports.
Larry Baker, news director of television station KNDO in Yakima, told me over the phone as his station and KIMA fed us these pictures. It feels like it's midnight in Yakima now with a light snowfall, except that snow is really a heavy layer of volcanic ash which comes down hard, hurts the eyes, and stings to breathe. The roughly 55,000 people in Yakima have been urged by the sheriff to stay indoors, to have drinking water available, to wash the ash off immediately if they become covered with it, and not to use phones unless there's an emergency. It's been dark since 11 this morning. Everyone who has to be outside is wearing a surgical mask. Doctors in Yakima hospitals report people are getting the ash into their upper respiratory tracts.
The best thing to do to avoid that is to just use a mask like you have. Cotton cloth, maybe moistened, will help to filter out some of this. But even if it does get back into your nose and throat, the biggest problem is one of irritation and cough.
Authorities are not going to evacuate Yakima. They are just telling the residents to stay inside. And that applies to animals, too. Kimberly Kohler, Channel 6 News.
KYN-TV, Portland.
Newsroom 6 continued to broadcast throughout the night, but it wasn't until the next day that reporters were allowed aboard the National Guard helicopters. Reporter Bill Diaz was one of the first to go along.
As we approached the volcano, signs of the devastation were everywhere. The flood plain that had once been the North Fork of the Toutle broadened before us. Trees that had stood tall for decades were laid waste. They littered the slopes in neat rows like so many ashy poles, their limbs shorn and incinerated by the heat blast from the volcano. How anyone could have survived the awesome display was beyond me, yet Earl Cook, our pilot, pointed out a spot from which they'd rescued two plucky souls only the day before. Then we were at the base of the volcano itself, the flood zone now steaming like some godforsaken primeval flame.
Well, you can smell it now. Let's try not to, okay?
As we flew closer to the ash cloud, our pilot nervously suggested we turn back. We looked vainly for Spirit Lake, but saw nothing but cloud and mud. Scientists say the last event of this magnitude at Mount St. Helens happened some 30,000 years ago. It will be centuries at least before this wound can close and the scars completely heal. Bill Diaz, Channel 6 News over the Toutle River Valley.
The pictures and reports which our crews brought back would be broadcast around the world.